A serger has been compared to the microwave of the sewing room. While a microwave offers a wide range of cooking options, many of us use that appliance only to reheat leftovers equally. A serger can offer more than a great seam finish, but that's its most important use. But it's time to learn more. Not cooking, but serging and sewing. And with us is Pam Maschie, the Educational Ambassador for Baby Lock, with our final episode of the Serger Workshop. Pam, we've covered the overlock, rolled edge, flat lock, but now it's time for more.
Yes, it is, and we're going to use the cover and chain stitch today, like you have on your vest. And we're going to start with the cover stitch. We'll detail its functional and decorative options. Speedy hemming with 2 needles or decorative top stitching with 3 needles are just 2 techniques we'll detail.
Serger Workshop, that's what's coming up next on Sewing with Nancy.
Sewing with Nancy, TV's longest-airing sewing and quilting program with Nancy Zieman, is made possible by Baby Lock, a complete line of sewing, quilting, and embroidery machines and sergers. Baby Lock, for the love of sewing. Madeira, specializing in embroidery, quilting, and special effect threads, because creativity is never black and white. Koala Studios, fine sewing furniture custom built in America. Clover, makers of sewing, knitting, quilting, and embroidery products for over 25 years. Experience the Clover difference. Amazing Designs and Class A Needles.
During this 3-part series on the Serger Workshop, Pam and I are working with just small samples and encouraging you to do the same, to test out your serger, to use it more than just overcast those edges. In the first show, we worked with the overlock stitch. Whether seaming or creating a decorative edge, it's one of the most versatile stitches we have. With a few adjustments, you can make a tiny rolled edge stitch, rolled hem stitch, 2 terms that give you the same results, and you can experiment with decorative threads. And then a few more tweaks to the machine and a flat lock occurs right in the middle of the fabric. You'll either have the ladder or the serpentine look depending upon which side of the fabric you're looking at. But now it's time for the 4th important area of serging, and that's the cover stitch. You'll find that on purchased shirts, t-shirts, knit shirts. At the hemline, you'll see a double needle stitching, but on the flip side, you'll see the stitch is covering the raw edge, hence the name cover stitch. Pam, the setup for the cover stitch is a little bit different than a basic overlock.
Yes, it is. It is completely different because now we're going to be sewing in the middle of our fabric. When we worked with the flat lock stitch, we actually folded our fabric. And today, by using the chain and cover stitch, we can sew right through the middle of our fabrics.
Not all sergers can do a cover stitch, or what we'll do later is a chain stitch.
Correct.
Check with your model number and your owner's manual.
Correct. And when we work with an overlock, we are sewing on the edge. Here we're going to sew in the middle of our fabric, and not, as you said, all machines are capable of doing that. So please check that out. But let's go through the setup for a cover stitch. We're going to start again by placing our threads on the top of the machine and following our owner's manual and the threading path for that. As we come down into the machine, we're going to be threading our chain looper. And the chain looper is going to feed from the underside of the machine. So let me just go ahead and thread that for you. Okay. And now that we've threaded the chain looper, we also work with 2 needles in the machine. I think you're going to be working with all 3 needles in just a minute and showing them. But on my machine, I have 2 needles that are in the widest sewing position.
So there's a left, a center, and a right
and a right sewing position. And that's actually what indicates the width of your stitch, are the different needle positions. Looking at our foot, as Nancy said, we are going to be doing some hemming in this segment. And when you look at your presser foot, you'll notice that there are some grooves or markings that are on the foot itself. On all of our feet are these markings indicating where the needles are going to be positioned.
Now you're using a cover stitch foot. It's a little bit narrower.
Yes, and if we look at that in comparison to our standard sewing foot, it is much narrower, and it will help us then go over our seam allowances and the various thicknesses of the fabric.
Just might want to point out that all sergers may look slightly different. Your feet may not look exactly like this, but they'll have some of the same traits and characteristics.
Correct, correct. Now let's look at our setup. As we said, we're going to be sewing in the middle of our fabric. So it's very important that our blade is recessed and it's not going to cut the fabrics at all. So we want to make sure that that's locked. We also can set our stitch length. And because we are going to be stitching in the middle of our fabric, we are going to insert the flatbed sewing table, and the upper looper is in the down sewing position.
I always have to refer to my owner's manual at this time just to make sure I've caught all of these steps.
Exactly, and when you thread, you are again going to be threading in the same order that you would when you do an overlock stitch. Loopers, then your needles, okay? Then I'm going to attach the flatbed sewing table. To the flatbed sewing table, I'm going to attach the fabric guide. So the fabric guide just simply screws in, just like a seam allowance guide would on your sewing machine.
Sure.
So set that up, and a very easy way to set the width of that fabric guide is to lay your piece of fabric down and line it up with the markings that are on the presser foot. But when we stitch, we are going to flip the fabric over and then just simply stitch. Now your stitch will not form unless it is on fabric.
So start sewing on the fabric.
Start sewing on your fabric and just continue to stitch. And again, that guide is a big help because we're sewing in the middle.
Now this is just a sample. You know, you're going to be sewing a hem, which Pam will do in a few minutes, but just to show
So here
the width.
the width, exactly.
And it covers the edge, and if you are sewing and serging in a circle, there's a few more little hints to keep in mind.
Now it's all about those little markings and guides that are on the presser foot itself. So again, we're wanting to make sure that our fabric is going to be stitching over, or the needles are going to be stitching over the edge. So we're going to slide that under the presser foot, and we're going to adjust the guide.
Because you're sewing on the right side and it's covering the raw edge on the underside. So that's an important step.
Right. So we're just going to flip that over and we're going to start to stitch. And again, if you are wanting to see that serpentine stitch showing, we would sew with the hem side up.
It's one of the fastest ways I know of hemming.
Right, and it's very flexible as well.
Now the main purpose of showing you this technique is that as Pam is reaching her starting point, she's going to align the stitches.
Right, and what if I could borrow your scissors there,
Certainly.
Nancy? Thank you. It's important to trim off the first row of, or the starting point of those needle threads. And as you guide, just simply align the marks that are on the toe of the presser foot with the stitching lines. Continue to stitch, and it overlaps and guides them all together.
Do a little tying of those threads and you'll have your hem. Another decorative option is to work with all 3 needles. You can notice that I have 3 threads at the top of my machine and 4 for the chain stitch. And this has a decorative serpentine stitch. I also have it on the vest I'm wearing. And here is the decorative serpentine and all 3 needles. It's the same setup, only adding that additional middle needle so that I have 1, 2, 3 to serge. You serge in the same manner as you would with a traditional overlock stitch. Nothing too difficult. Just I'm going to put it underneath the fabric and make a little sample, which you might want to do as well.
And another quick little tip, Nancy, is that when you have fused, if you turn your hem up, put a little bit of fusible web under and it will hold it in place and you don't have to use any pins.
And as I stitch, you can see all 3 needles as a decorative effect, and then the serpentine on the other side for another option. Attachments and specialty feet give your serger even more flexibility and creativity. Starting with the belt loop binder attachment, learn how to create belt loops, create trim or activewear straps. It just takes serger know-how. I'd like to show you again the sample that we made for this serger workshop of the straps or belt loops with the belt loop binder. Now this is the woven fabric. Pam, I've seen you make this with trim, make a little trim for fabric, lightweight fabric, and then out of knit fabric, activewear, you can stretch because there's elastic inside this strap. And it's a great example or sample to make so that you can see the options. It's attachments and specialty feet that you can get for your serger. All sergers have them. Some come with the serger, some you buy separately. And this is a funny looking attachment. And Pam, you'll show us how it's attached to your machine.
Sure thing. We're going to attach it with the screws just as we did the fabric guide before. And we're going to align it with the markings that are on the presser foot because again, those are aligning with each one of the needles. Right now I have 3 needles in the machine. We are only going to be using the 2 outside needles.
Now that's a neat thing about a cover stitch is that you can have all the needles there, but if they're not threaded, they're not going to stitch.
They're not going to stitch at all, absolutely.
Unlike an overlock stitch, you need to remove a needle if you're not going to use it.
Right, right.
Little side note.
Side note there and a quick little tip. And it also makes it much easier when you're going to be aligning because you have a focal point. Now when we insert the fabric into the belt loop binder, it's essential that you cut your fabric at an angle, and that's going to help you insert the fabric into the attachment. So we simply slide the fabric into the attachment, and I use one of the tools that comes with the machine, raise the presser foot, and with the front toe just raised up, grab the tip, pull it under the presser foot so it can pick it up and start to guide it. Now you do have a tension dial here on the side of your machine, and you want to make sure that it's loosened enough so that it does not pull on your fabric. We're then going to just start stitching just to get the fabric seated underneath the presser foot, and then raise up the fabric tail, slide the elastic into the attachment, and like magic, it's just going to start pulling it in and wrapping it right around the elastic. Very simple.
So I'll wrap the fabric around the elastic, and the elastic still maintains its elasticity, its stretch, and you're going to be serging much longer strips, not for the sample workbook, but for a real project.
Right, and you see you have great flexibility in that.
Now Pam's going to put on a different foot while I explain our next accessory or specialty stitch on a serger, and that's pin tucks. Usually don't think of pin tucks as a technique that you can work with on a serger, and they're raised pin tucks. Heirloom sewing, evening wear, bridal wear are great examples or places where you'd work with a pin tuck foot. If you've made pin tucks, with a traditional sewing machine, you know that you need a specialty foot, and so we have the same thing here. Your foot may look just a little bit different than perhaps mine does, but the fact is it has a groove on the underside, and the tucks are raised because the foot will cause the fabric to go over this raised bar and then do the stitching of the cover stitch. This is going to be a narrower width, not the wide width of the cover stitch. Pam is rethreading as we speak. You got good eyes that you're getting those needles threaded just about.
I rethreaded, and actually in this case I am going to remove that outside needle, and I've attached the small fabric T-bar to the front of the plate, which again is going to help give you that raised effect to the pin tucks. And again, all we have to do is just simply align the fabric with the markings that are on the presser foot. And one quick little tip I'd like to share with you is that when you start to stitch, just simply place your index fingers on the outside edge of your fabric of the presser foot and just simply stitch. Now I have increased the tension again all the way to the maximum setting because we want the fabric to actually be pulled tight on the back side.
We did put a press mark down the front of the fabric so that you had a line to stitch on.
Okay, so now we have one raised pin tuck, as you can see. And then we're just going to use the outside edge of our presser foot as a guide, which makes it very convenient. And as we stitch these, you'll notice that they might draw up just a little bit. But with a quick press, you're going to achieve a very beautiful result.
Now I have a sample here that has 3 rows, and you can see that drawing up that Pam mentioned, it doesn't look too attractive right now. It's because on the underside the cover stitch has caused, the cover thread has, the tightened tension has caused it to draw up. So all I have to do now is just do a quick press. You're going to be working with probably batiste or silk, or perhaps a crepe de chine in this instance. And as I press it, it's just amazing what happens. And the pin tucks are fast, they're very even, and the raised effect is very nice. And you can see what it looks like on the inside, or the wrong side I should say, and the right side. And it's just another Serger Workshop technique we'd like you to try. Eliminate all but one of the cover stitch needles and you'll have a chain stitch. Use this 2-thread stitch for seaming, top stitching, or decorative chain stitching. We're living up to our mantra, sergers are not just for clean finishing edges. You saw a close-up of the decorative chain stitching working with just one of the needles and the chain looper. And the first item that we said is to make a seam. Serge a seam, a traditional 1-stitch 2-thread seam. And that's not what most of us use this serger for.
Not very often, but many cases you're wanting to have a seam allowance that you can adjust, or maybe you're wanting to just do a quick little basting almost of your garment and still be able to press that seam allowance open. We are threaded with 2 threads, as you said, one in our needle, and we can use any one of those 3 needles, and the chain looper. We've attached the fabric guide, which again gives us a 5/8 inch seam allowance from the needle position that we're placed in. We just simply slide it in just like we would on our sewing machine and stitch.
And people will find, and this is relatively odd, but you'll find this chain stitch when you buy a package of flour or sugar. That's the way the paper bags are stitched together with this same stitch, but it works in a seam.
Right.
And you can easily press open.
You can easily press that open, and many times we want to have a seam allowance pressed open.
Now for the decorative part of it, you saw this little sample that you can make during the Serger Workshop and place it in your notebook as we follow along, but this has decorative thread in the chain looper. We've used the all-purpose Serger thread in the needle. Now remember, Serger thread is 2-ply, not 3-ply like traditional sewing machine thread, because of the usually the number of cones that are used at one time. So this is a very lightweight thread, but then we can work with the heavier thread, 6-weight, 12-weight. Interesting though, Pam, we should point out that the larger the number of the thread, the finer
the thread is.
So a 6 or 12 is a heavier weight thread. It always seems opposite to me, but I'm not in charge of that.
That's the way they mark them.
So here we have a 6-weight or a 12-weight thread in the chain looper. I'm just going to rotate my serger around a little bit more so you can see this. But as we look at it, you'll have a tension dial for the chain looper, and you're going to loosen it. And I have it loosened because I have this heavier thread. This thread normally shows on the underside of the fabric, but now we want it to be foremost. So you'll be sewing on the wrong side of the fabric rather than on the right side, just on a single layer. And that simple change of the thread and using just one of the needles of the cover stitch will give you just that decorative look. This is not difficult. It's just knowing that you can use...
We're giving you permission.
Yeah, exactly. I like that. To use heavier thread. Do a test, because you may find that it'll be necessary to loosen the needle tension or lengthen the stitch, which we did. We lengthened the stitch to 3 to give that chain looper more exposure. So you can seam with it, you can make decorative chain stitching, you can top stitch with it. And that's with working with the chain stitch, just part of the seam or part of the options of a cover stitch, and the many ways you can work with your serger. Most of us think of sewing and quilting as a creative outlet. My guest during this Nancy's Corner segment thinks there's more. She's convinced that sewing builds confidence, especially in young kids. Please welcome Connie Koch. Connie is a passionate sewist from the state of Washington who will share with us the Threads of Life sewing program for kids that she began at Puyallups Meeker Elementary School. Welcome to Sewing with Nancy, Connie.
Thank you for having me, Nancy.
Why I was so interested in having you as a guest on Sewing with Nancy is that you started an after-school program and you're working with young girls 10 to 12 and you started it from scratch.
I did. And don't forget boys.
Oh,
I'm
excuse me.
campaigning really hard for boys. I did. I started the program back in 2007, and I'm excited to bring it back into the schools because most of the schools are not carrying it anymore. And I'm target 5th and 6th grade students, and it's just an amazing age. They're full of vitality and want to really, really, really learn something new to them.
And you haven't just started with teaching them small, simple pillows. No. You're gung-ho.
We are. This is curriculum-based, how I set it up, so everything has a purpose. Of course, we do a little project to let them learn about the sewing machine, but we go right into garments. They sew clothing. They sew t-shirts. They work on knits. They work on cottons. They work on whatever they come in, they get to choose their fabrics. So they sew t-shirts, skirts, pajama pants. They sew second-year students, so with collars and buttons and buttonholes and zippers and hoodies.
They can do it.
Yes,
if they can text message, they can sew.
They can.
And so how many students do you work with at a time?
10 in a class. I have currently, last year I currently had 22 enrolled, but 10 per class. So I have a first year class and a second year class.
And you start in the fall?
We start in October. Get over the back to school things in December or September. So start in October and we sew through May. At the end of May, we have an amazing fashion celebration for them.
And it's a style show.
It is a style show.
And the kids model more than one thing? Or?
They do. They get their changes in the back and they walk the runway. I call it my Project Kids Fashion Runway celebration for them. And they walk it New York style to music and the whole thing.
One of the interesting things that I found about your program is that you said it builds confidence.
Yes, it does.
And tell our audience a little bit about that, what you've experienced and seen from the kids participating.
Well, I believe that usually around that time, it is a time where they're trying to make decisions with school and with friends. And through fabric, I have found that instant gratification, like I did it myself, and they see it, and they're wearing it, they just puff up, and they are so proud of themselves that they can conquer anything. They can do anything.
And you mentioned that some third graders are kind of putting themselves on the list.
Yes, they are. I have parents come to me and say, I can't wait till my child gets in, 5th grade, and why can't you take 4th graders? And so,
you've committed yourself to this. I mean, you said yes, and you did not let these kids down.
Yes.
And you even go so far as to making some of these cute little awards.
Yes, that is, I deem that our Golden Seam Ripper Award, and I actually made that myself, but that is at the end of the year, and one first-year class student gets one and one second year, and it goes beyond how many hours they seam rip. It goes to the whole, how they capture the love of sewing and just how they embrace it.
You've called a lot of people to help out, to donate machines, to donate fabric, and I like your statement that you never let one word stop you.
No, exactly, the no word. I don't let that stop me. If you want to start something, and I encourage anybody to start this because it's a blessing for everybody involved, but don't take no.
Well, Connie, inspiring. Thank you for sharing your story about the Threads for Life sewing program, and thank you for watching. You can find more about the Threads for Life sewing program for kids by going to our website, nancyzieman.com. You click on Nancy's Corner Under the 2500 series, you'll find Threads for Life, and you can watch the current Sewing with Nancy program, this segment, rewatch this episode, whatever you'd like. You can also read my blog at nancyzieman.com. All things Sewing with Nancy are found there. Special thanks to Pam Maschey for being my guest during the Serger Workshop portion, the 3-episode series, Learning How to Use Your Serger to Its Fullest Potential. And we hope that you will make the best use of sewing for yourself, for kids, and we always thank you for watching. Bye for now.
Nancy and Pam's fully illustrated Serger Workshop workbook includes laminated instructions for all the techniques featured in this 3-part series. It's $19.99 plus shipping and handling. To order the workbook, call 800-336-8373 or visit our website at sewingwithnancy.com/2514. Order item number BK2514. Serger Workshop. Credit card orders only. To pay by check or money order, call the number on the screen for details. Visit Nancy's website at nancyzieman.com to see additional episodes, Nancy's blog, and more. Sewing with Nancy, TV's longest-airing sewing and quilting program with Nancy Zieman, has been brought to you by Baby Lock, Madeira Threads, Koala Studios, Clover, Amazing Designs, and Class A Needles. Closed captioning funding provided by Rowenta. Sewing with Nancy is a co-production of Nancy Zieman Productions and Wisconsin Public Television.